Welcome into episode 430 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue, Scott McLaughlin, and for the time being, Melvin Prue, who, before we started recording, and as he looks at the camera, hasn't stopped chirping Scott for BU falling to Denver, or not Denver, Western Michigan in the national championship game.
It's unbelievable. I didn't know Melvin was such a Broncos fan.
Yeah, no, he likes to troll people, so he knows you're an easy target.
It kind of mean-spirited, actually, some of the things he was saying. Like, I thought it crossed the line.
It was ruthless. If it was NHL mic'd up, they would have been sentences left and right. But in any event, yeah, there's Melvin Prue. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast, he's a little quiet at the moment. But Bridget's been dealing with some pets fighting, so we'll try to.
That's why he's with me, but he's about to jump back off and try to get the cat again. So I have two boy pets. I have my dog Melvin and my cat Xerxes, and they have a feud going on, and it is continuing right now. So anyway,
and when they don't have a feud going on, it's probably me or Scott. So there's always issues around you.
Oh yeah.
Bridget's just gonna have the Looney Tunes ball of fur and smoke in the background during this episode.
You saw what I had to do right before we started recording, right? I had to grab him because he was trying to chase the cat. Anyway, Melvin, you're being distracting. Okay, let's be good. Let's get to our opening shifts.
Scott, why don't we go to you with the opening shifts?
So Fabian Lysell scored his first NHL goal on Sunday. Obviously, Bruins get a 4-1 win over the Penguins. We can get into what that means in the standings. They're, as of now, still fourth worst record, but could, if they win on Tuesday, potentially jump as high as sixth worst. But yeah, Lysell has started to play better these last few games. He got his first point with an assist a couple games ago. That was on Tuesday against New Jersey. Maybe took a slight step back Thursday in Chicago along with the rest of the team, and then played another really good game in addition to getting the goal. The goal comes on the power play where he just gets open all alone in front, takes a pass from Pavel Zacha and scores 5-hole. But made some good plays throughout the game. First period, he had a shift where he set up Pavel Zacha for a scoring chance and then set up Fraser Minton later in the shift. I think it was his very next shift right after that. Uses his speed to drive wide on the defenseman. I think that was Ryan Graves. Takes the puck right to the net, forces Tristan Jarry to make a save. And again, especially the New Jersey game last week, just active and on the puck and using his speed to make plays in transition. Looked confident. He gets the TNT interview after the game. So good to see. We covered, and I think I especially talked about how he was too quiet probably his first 8 NHL games, and maybe in a different circumstance he doesn't get game 9, 10, and 11 if he's quieter. But the Bruins are in a position where they can keep rolling him out, and it took some time, but now he's playing better. He's got one more game to go Tuesday, and then he's got the AHL playoffs, which I asked him about last week, and he seems legitimately excited for. As he pointed out, he's now in his third year spending time in Providence. He hasn't been healthy for the playoffs the last 2 years. So he's looking forward to that. Providence has a good team, could potentially go on a run. So, Fabian Lysell can't win a job for next year right now, but he's at least starting to take some steps and show some signs for optimism.
Yeah, and of the younger guys that have gotten call-ups recently, Fabian Lysell is the one who's gotten the most legitimate chance over the last few weeks. It's probably been over a month now, actually, because he started out on that West Coast road trip from hell and has gotten better.
It was March 22nd that he got back out.
Okay, so
under almost a month, yeah.
But it feels like a pretty good chunk of games at this point, more so than some of the other guys have gotten. Obviously, Fraser Minton has come up and gotten some chances. Riley Duran came up. He just got sent back down this morning. And my opening shift is to do with the transactions. So Riley Duran and Mike Callahan get sent back down to Providence. And coming the other way on an emergency call-up basis is John Farinacci and Frederick Brunet, who Farinacci is a forward. Maybe people remember when he played at Harvard. The Bruins picked him up as a free agent, signing because his draft rights expired. So they signed him. Was that the beginning of this year or last year?
That was last year.
So yeah, last offseason they signed him, and he's been in Providence this whole time. Pretty reliable two-way forward. And then Frederick Brunet, young defenseman from Providence, 21 years old. This year he's been in 68 games for the Providence Bruins, 5 goals, 19 assists, 24 points as a defenseman. Pretty big, 6'3", almost 200 pounds. And he's been in the AHL for a while now. He's 117 AHL games for him. So last game of the season, going to look at 2 other younger guys that, maybe these call-ups are more of a throw you a bone kind of call-up than a real legitimate, hey, we're going to, this is going to be an actual tryout kind of situation. I guess it's a little bit of both probably. But anyway, we're going to get to look at 2 different younger guys, and we can talk about just what the future holds and which guys could be here next year, and how many will just end up in Providence again. But I do think I want to talk more about Lysell for sure, because he's the most legitimate of the young players who's been working for to impress the organization for a spot next season.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Fabian for sure. And I want to talk about quickly what is still at stake this season from a team perspective. And obviously, with the Bruins defeating the Penguins on Sunday, you'll have fans that will not be too pleased about that because they want the Bruins to lose to try to ensure themselves that highest draft position pre-lottery. And I'll be honest, like I was one of those individuals 2-3 weeks ago when there was still a lot of games to be, still like 10 games left for each team, and the Bruins could have still slid down to like 9, 10, 11, maybe even 12. I didn't want that at all. But of course, as things play out, the situation at hand changes. So for example, yesterday when if the Bruins defeated the Penguins yesterday, which they did, they would still have finished the day, well, I guess depends how you look at it, but lower in the standings than Philadelphia and Seattle. And I just want to update listeners on what the current standings are heading into game 82 for the Bruins, for the Kraken, and games 81 and 82 for Philadelphia. So right now, the Bruins are 29th in the NHL with 75 points. Seattle's 28th with 76 points, and Philadelphia is 27, also with 76 points. Now, Philly has less games played than Seattle. That's why they're in front of Seattle. But overall, the tiebreaker in the NHL, the first tiebreaker, is regulation wins. Seattle has more regulation wins than both Boston and Philly. Boston has more regulation wins than Philly. And with the games remaining, nobody can catch Seattle in regulation wins. So if all things are created equally and they all finish with the same points, Seattle would finish above the Bruins and Philly, and the Bruins would finish above the Flyers. I know that probably is confusing, so I'll just keep it simple. In game 82, Boston will finish with the 4th overall pick in the draft pre-lottery if they lose in regulation to the Devils, if they lose in overtime to the Devils, and Philly gets just 1 more point in their final 2 games, or if the Bruins win, which would be worst case scenario for a lot of Bruins fans. Don't win game 82. If the Bruins win game 82, there's still a chance they end up with the 4th pick in the draft pre-lottery, and that would be if Seattle gets at least 1 point in game 82, and if Philly gets at least 2 out of 4 points in their final 2 games. So I know listening to this on a podcast format or watching on YouTube, your head might be like, what the fuck did you just say? But like I said, that's essentially how the Bruins would finish with the the 29th seeding in the NHL in different scenarios, and then how do they finish 5th or 6th? I didn't play those out, but that would be even more confusing. So that's the simplest way I can probably keep it.
Yeah. Basically, all you need to know is that they lose in regulation, they're the 4th worst record, period. Yeah, if they're tied with Seattle, they lose the tiebreaker. If they're tied with Philly, they win the tiebreaker, meaning they finish higher in the standings, so worse draft position. There's if anyone feels like having a late night Monday, there's a game worth keeping an eye on, and that is Kings at Oilers. A, playoff preview, but B, those two teams are still fighting for home ice in that first round series. And the reason I bring that up is that the Kings then turn around and play Seattle Tuesday night. If the Kings beat the Oilers, the Kings lock up home ice in the first round. Tuesday becomes meaningless for them. Maybe that makes it a more winnable game for Seattle. If the Oilers beat the Kings, then the Kings have a lot to play for Tuesday night against Seattle, and that becomes a much tougher game for Seattle to win. So just something to keep an eye on there. Philly has winnable games. Their schedule is Columbus and Buffalo these last two. So, and they kind of like turned it on since firing Tortorella, which in retrospect, I wonder if they wish they had just kept Tortorella through the end of the season and kept losing, because it seems like fire him kind of lit a fire under that team and like got guys playing better, which I don't know if that was really their intent. So
addition by subtraction.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess my take on this has kind of always been like Don Sweeney tanked about as well as you can tank. Like, traded away a lot at the deadline. This has clearly been a very bad team post-trade deadline. I guess maybe if you want to say like they should have traded away Morgan Geekie too, but like then that's just one more spot you have to fill in the offseason. Once you strip down that roster, players and coaches aren't going to tank, and it's just not realistic to ask them to. So yeah, they went out, they had a good effort in Pittsburgh, and they beat another bad team. And it's like, I can't get worked up over that because you're putting a bad roster on the ice. The team isn't good unless you're benching David Pastrnak, which is just going to piss him off and is not something you really want to do, right? Like, Pastrnak's going to play all 82 games. That means something to guys. If you're like, no, we're just going to sit you even though you're healthy, even though you could keep racking up points, like, it's just not realistic. It's not going to happen. So
it's also not realistic to bring up a bunch of young guys and expect them not to try. I mean, maybe you can expect them not to score because they're not good enough, but like, they're going to try to impress you because this might be their only chance to do it. So the young guys are still trying for their own purposes. Pastrnak the other guys are just competitors. Nobody's out there trying to lose. The reason why the Bruins ended up tanking was it was a passive thing. It was out of their control that they just weren't good enough to beat certain teams because of the roster that they had. But nobody's just gonna shoot a puck into their own net and make this the difference of finishing with maybe the 4th pick versus the 5th pick. And by the way, the way the lottery works, who knows? You could finish 5th and still end up in the same spot you would have, because the ping pong balls just happen to go that way. You would never know what your original position would have been, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. They still end up with the same pick, whether they finish 4th or 5th, just based on the odds.
Yeah, and the odds are something that we've talked about before, and yeah, like you could end up with the 7th pick in a draft. You can get first. I think the most important thing about having
11, you can still there's still a chance that you get but anyway.
I think the more important thing when it comes to being as high as possible in the or low as possible in the standings with the highest pick pre-lottery is you control how far you can slide down.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the most important thing. Like, yes, you could be 7th and get first, but if you're fourth, you're not going past sixth. If you're eighth, you're going even lower. And nobody on this podcast was saying or suggesting that players and coaches wouldn't try when they're on the ice. I think, to be honest with you, it just would have been frustrating if with 3 weeks left in the season, if the Bruins ended up having the 10th or 11th pick in the draft pre-lottery, and then they slide, and maybe like and then they slide down. Like, I just wanted them to be, both can be true. I wanted the team to end with a higher draft position based on how bad the team was this year and what they deserved, but not say that I wanted the coaches and players to tank. The only conversation we had on here that was remotely debated was the possibility of activating a previously injured Charlie McAvoy, and that never came to fruition, so it's not even worth bringing up now. But that was the only point of contention on this podcast. So nobody's really claiming. And if fans out there are saying that they should fail on purpose if they're in the lineup, well, that's just obviously that's just completely unrealistic. But
or like I said, or like the second thing that I think some fans would say is just bench Pastrnak for like the end of the season, which I also think is not realistic, but maybe people disagree.
I watched this game, yesterday's game, Sunday's game, with friends, and they were like, they were so conflicted because somebody would score and they'd be like, yay, and then immediately they'd be like, oh, wait a minute, no, like it was like a delayed, like your instincts are to cheer, and then the delayed reaction, which is like, oh, but what's going to happen with their pick? And so, I mean, it's the appetite is still there to watch the team score, but then logically people, or maybe some of them illogically, but people want to see the result be a loss. And my friends who I was watching it with, they were very excited for Lysell. I mean, there's certain guys that you're watching, you're like, I want to see them do really well. I want to see them progress. I want to see them, put up a good case for themselves when they have something to play for, right? Like they still have a lot to play for, some of those younger guys. And when Lysell scored and you see him just get this big smile and the team react and everybody just, giving him credit and just to watch the overall game he had to, not just the goal, look better and better and better over the past, few games. He seems to be making legitimate progress towards acclimating to the NHL speed and in the NHL game. That's something I know all my friends were rooting for and we're happy to see.
Yeah, and I'll just say this to put a ribbon on the draft positioning as we head into game 82, because there's much more to talk about. But again, a few weeks ago, the possibilities were vast. They could have finished top 5. They could have finished 12th, or like it. Right now, we have more information. More has happened. I think the three of us can sit here on this podcast today and safely say the Bruins should end up with at least the fourth. That's right. Yeah. Melvin as well. Yep. I got you, Melvin.
He hasn't moved.
No, he hasn't. He's been a good boy. That the Bruins should end up with at least the 4th or 5th pick in the draft pre-lottery, which means they really shouldn't slide further than 6th or 7th with their actual selection. And because I just don't see both Philly and Seattle finishing lower in the standings in Boston based off what we've talked about, which I think we can all sit here as Bruins fans hopeful for the future and say, okay, if the worst that they can draft is 7th overall this year, okay, would love for that to be higher, but if that's the lowest that they can go, I will take that as the lowest, right? So I think we all would. But Bridget, you bring up Fabian Lysell and Scott, whether it's Lysell, Minton, others, how important is it going to be for the Bruins next year for younger players to not just show that they can play at the NHL level, but be impactful players? Because the Bruins are going to try to address this team's needs, whether you like it or not, through free agency to an extent, possibly the draft if they get somebody who's NHL ready, which is not high, but it could happen. And obviously you have some players that will come back healthy like McAvoy and Lindholm, which really helps shore up your blue line. All that said, they're still going to need young players internally to, like I said, not just perform or keep up, but produce at the NHL level. Lysell, Boston hopes is one of them. and some others. But just your thoughts on Lysell's game and maybe his stint so far since late March.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, like it was too quiet at first for I'd say the first 7 games of this most recent call up. I think I even might have used the word overmatched. Like that's what I thought. I thought he looked like a player who was not NHL ready. Um, to his credit, he corrected some things and started making some plays. Now, if we're gonna say like these last 3 games have been stronger, which they certainly have, it does have to be pointed out. Like they've come against a bad Penguins team that doesn't play defense, a Blackhawks team that outplayed the Bruins, but it's a horrible team, and a Devils team that is completely depleted and limping to the finish line, even though they are a playoff team. So, like, good for him. Like that is where it has to start. It's unfortunate we're not going to see him against a better team. I still think it's unfortunate that they sat him against the Capitals, which just felt like being, I don't know, it felt like being a little bit too much of the protective mother. Like sometimes you just have to let your kids go out and scrape their knees. And I felt like that's sort of what you needed to do.
You're not a parent. You are.
I'm not, but I was a kid who scraped my knees a
Yeah,
lot.
let's just let him go out here. Give him a bat. Give him,
The point is you can't
give him
protect
some
kids from that.
fireworks. Let him go outside.
Okay, I didn't say fireworks. Jesus, I said like let them like fall off their skateboard, maybe. Like
Let them ski down the blue when they first put on skis.
yeah, there you go. No, but like you can't protect them from everything, and I don't know why they were trying to protect Lysell from the big bad Washington Capitals. Like I don't know, let him play and see what it looks like. But anyways, that's done and gone now. So yeah, so he'll have one more game here. It is important because I think Lysell needed something to feel good about heading into the offseason, and hopefully he can parlay this into a strong AHL postseason with the P Bruins. And then, build through the offseason and make a better push next training camp than he did this year. Because again, there was an opening there for him this year, and he didn't take advantage of it. He didn't kick down that door. So if you're the Bruins, I think the way you approach it is like you're not going to just give Lysell a spot or just leave a spot wide open for him. But this team's going to have openings just by the nature of where this roster is and how much they can realistically do in one summer. So there's going to be openings, and hopefully Lysell's in a better spot to force his way into one.
Yeah, and Anson Carter asked Lysell about it after the game. He kind of like, he talked a lot more than asking a question about how, a team like the Bruins, these openings don't come up often. And I think he was just trying to gauge whether or not Lysell like understood how this was and how important this was or how rare it was or whatever. And when you think about it, like they're going to have to fill a lot of spots, the Bruins are, from the outside this offseason with free agents, trades, whatever it may be. Maybe doing, trading something right before the draft or whatever. But there are seemingly too many holes to fill completely from the outside. So even if you're just filling 1 or 2 from the inside, first of all, that'd be a great help because this is a contract that's not going to be super heavy on the cap. And, you want to see some of your in-house guys proceed with their careers as you intended and make the NHL. So for Lysell, it's looking good, honestly. Like if you were to ask me, like, who has an inside track on it, to say an open winger job, he's doing pretty well. But at the same time, do they come in and they fill that position and then they need a center and then then it's Fraser Mitten that gets the spot, you understand? So it's going to depend on what other moves they do in the offseason. And I know you're saying, Scott, that he's done this against lesser teams, but he's also done this when the Bruins were not at their best. And I do know, like, in your article you talked more about the positives, not like necessarily with the asterisks. Like if we take the asterisks off of it, like what have you seen? Both of you have. What have you seen improve in his game? Because to me, I like the way that his decision making seems to be better informed by his NHL experience. And he's clearly taking the coaching of, you know, when to use his skill set of his speed and transition, his going to the front of the net. Like you see the confidence really has done a lot. And sometimes that does just take feeling comfortable with the speed. So yeah.
You know, a question I have on a young player, guys, since we talk about all this, is Matt Patra. And he's done a really good job down in Providence producing. We know he's in the Bruins' plans in the NHL.
He just had a 7-point weekend. Him and Donzela Schmelis, both 7 points over the weekend, 2 games.
And I'm glad you said Don's name because I didn't want to butcher that. But yes, so Patra's producing down in Providence. He's doing what they want him to do. But right now, if you look at, my question is, what's the plan for the Bruins lineup if you have, let's just say next year you have Minton making the team and you have Patra making the team. Like you already have Elias Lindholm as a center. Casey Middlestat is a center, could play wing. Pavel Zacha is a center, could play wing. But let's just look at potential centers on this team next year, like at least, or guys that could play center and some of the redundancy in numbers, right? Elias Lindholm, Pavel Zacha, Casey Middlestat, Mark Kastelik, that's 4. Fraser Mitten's 5. Matt Patra is 6. Obviously, these guys wouldn't all play center in one game, but like they can move to wing. But it seems to be a bit of a logjam at that position. Obviously, there's player movement that could happen that we aren't aware of right now.
Like, hopefully they draft a center.
Right. Well, that draft pick is unlikely to probably play in the NHL next year. But I'm talking about next year's lineup. Like like I said, there's player movement that could happen we're unaware of, and some of those guys I just mentioned could be wingers next year. But you see what I'm saying? Like I just wonder where these players fit, and none of these center options are elite center options, obviously. But what do you make of the logjam with this position right now, and how some of these younger players like Mitten and Patra are hopefully looked at to be maybe wings, but maybe centers for the Bruins, and where they fit? Because you have Kastelik obviously as that 4th line center, you would imagine, right?
Yeah, the way I look at this is the Bruins know they don't have perfect answers at center, and so they're going to try to throw as many answers at the problem as they can, and whatever sticks. So where these guys fit or whether they all fit, I'm not really worried about. Like the guys who fit are the guys who come into camp and force their way into a job. And I can tell you right now, that's not going to be all of those guys. Like they're not all going to have great camps. If they do, then you have an awesome problem to figure out. So yeah, I'm not worried about a logjam because this team needs help at the center position. They need young guys to push, whether it's at center or on the wing. So having competition between them to me is only a good thing, right? Because like you normally would look at this roster right now and be like, boy, there doesn't really seem to be any competition for jobs. Like, you know, the competition's between guys who maybe don't deserve to be there. So if you end up in a situation going into camp where, you know, maybe you filled in your wing positions enough that you at least feel okay about, I don't know, say 4 or 5 of your top 6 wings. And then you have a competition at center among some young guys. Like, that's only a good thing to me. And,
yeah,
you know, if it turns out that I have so many young centers playing well that I don't know what to do with them, like, what a pleasant surprise that would be, because we've been talking about like, geez, where are the Bruins centers? Where are these young centers? So if suddenly you actually do have more than you can fit into the lineup, like that's a good thing. My expectation is like, yeah, 1 or 2 of these guys probably will force their way into a job, and 1 or 2 of them will probably have a pretty disappointing camp, and we'll start the year in Providence.
Yeah, unfortunately for Patra, the addition of Fraser Mitten kind of directly, maybe steps in the way of or provides direct competition for a job that he would get potentially like as a third line center.
Well, and Casey Middlestat, as it stands right now,
Yeah.
like he's a threat.
Yeah.
I mean, the way I see it, just to answer my own question, like, and I'm certainly not worried about this. I'm also just curious, like how it plays out. But if in a situation where let's just say let's just say Minton and Patra, for example, each had lights out camps, then and they're both battling for that 3C spot, hypothetically, then I just think one of them would probably just move to the wing. Like if both players play so well that they should be on the team, they'll make room for them. So I mean, I'm just more so I bring up the question because I'm just curious how it all plays out, and because we talk about this without knowing again player movement. Do they try to trade a Casey Middlestat, or do they just who they bring in free agency or whatever? So I'm definitely interested. But if you look at the Bruins lineup against the Penguins, I'm just going to read you off the wingers that played in that game. Down the left side, you had Geeky. He's part of the future, we think. Lauko. Okay, yeah, probably is like a depth guy, maybe a fourth liner. Kepke. We'll see. Husnudinov. We'll see. Okay, so a lot of question marks on the left side based off of last game's lineup. And then on the right side, you had Pasternak, obviously. We have Fabian Lysell. We just talked about him. He still has a job to win. Vinny Lettieri. He's a role player, depth guy, and then Duran. So when I talk about some of the logjam at potential center icemen, like I said, there's a lot of openings and question marks in the wing that if two centers battling for the same spot happen to both make the team, maybe there's some versatility in the wing. But yeah. Any other thoughts on Lysell's game or the young guys that played? Obviously, Riley Duran with a couple games here. And I know Callahan's going down for game 82 to Providence, so his season in Boston's over. Just maybe thoughts on how he's done. He got his first goal. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked what I saw from Riley Duran. Like, he works hard. I still think there's really limited offense there. Like, I don't think he's ever going to score at the NHL level in terms of like meaningful production, but you see a work ethic that could make for a good fourth liner potentially. So it was good for him to get a taste. And now you're going to see John Farinacci looks like he's going to plug right into the same spot at fourth line right wing for Tuesday night. Practice is going on while we're recording. So I saw Fluto tweeted out the lines, and Farinacci was with he was with Kuznetsov and Minton on what is basically the fourth line. So that's a good opportunity for him and Brunet, as Bridget mentioned. Like, those are two guys who had pretty good seasons in Providence, have now both had 2 full years in the AHL. So, good, nice little reward at the end of the season for them. Brunet's interesting because this team does not have a lot of defense prospects. And he's one of them who potentially has an NHL future. He's got some puck moving ability. He has improved defensively while he's been in the AHL. So, I think you mentioned like he has pretty good size. So I'm interested to see what he looks like. I don't know if he's going to be in a position to make a push next year. He is a left shot, and their left side does look a little more set than the right side for sure. But maybe someone switches, plays the offside. Like, it would be really nice for the Bruins if Frederic Brunet were ready to make a push, and one game's not going to decide that. But I am interested to see how he plays Tuesday.
Yeah, he's 6'3", almost 200 pounds. And he's 21 years old, so he's still pretty young. Yeah, he gets his game, and it'll be interesting. Like, at least with these past few weeks, even though we haven't had a whole lot of meaningful in terms of like standing stuff to talk about, in terms of, normally at this time of year we'd be talking about like, should they rest players, and we would be talking about these young guys because they're probably resting guys like Pasternak and Marchand and for the playoffs. Instead, we're talking about a team that there is no Marchand, and they're calling guys up to just, get a look because they can. Anyway, yeah, I'm excited to see both of them. I did think Callahan played pretty solidly. And he got his goal, which was nice to see. Both him and Duran are PC guys, local guys as well. So their families were all at those games. I'm sure those were some really feel good moments for them towards the end of the season. So I'm happy for them in that way. And I did think Duran had a decent camp. And then his time in Providence, like I haven't tracked quite as closely, but I'm sure all three of us are going to be watching or finding a way to watch the P Bruins playoff run if they go on one, and to just try to see what else we can glean. I mean, I'm not ready for hockey to be over. And I mean, it's not, but in Boston it is. So we're gonna all end up at like P Bruins games together, and like that's just what we're gonna be doing.
How are the Fleet doing this year?
They're right in the middle.
Okay, well,
You want to go up to Songus?
well, I was curious if there would be playoff hockey for them. Maybe they might be the last team in Boston.
Yeah, there should be.
Okay, so yeah, definitely some opportunities here. I think yeah, Brunet's an interesting one. So I want to keep an eye on him because we talk about the needs that the Bruins have next year up front. They also have some needs on the back end, and you would think that between Charlie McAvoy and Mason Lohrei and Hampus Lindholm, you could find one of them to be a effective power play quarterback. And you see it certainly in flashes with Lohrei, but it also just comes with a lot of boneheaded mistakes. And I just think you need someone that's more reliable back there. Can that be him in that spot? Because the Bruins power play, their special teams have to improve next year. So I'm not saying that Bernay is it Bernay? Bernay? I'm not saying he's the answer, obviously, but I think it may have been Anthony with Bruins Network who mentioned that he could have like NHL potential upside to like a Matt Grzelcyk type, and obviously Matt Grzelcyk was somebody who could run a power play. Again, I think
also totally small, like way different body dimensions.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you'll have to take that up with Anthony, but look, I don't know if I'm not saying that Bernay is the answer on the power play in Boston. I'm just saying it's interesting to see how somebody like that can develop and what they can make of an opportunity. You just never know, right? Like Torrey Krug. Did anybody think that an undrafted free agent out of Michigan State would be the Bruins power play quarterback for a decade? No, like you just never really know until somebody takes an opportunity and runs with it.
Well, the real answer, probably at least to your top power play unit,
Matthew Schaefer.
If it's not, no. I mean,
he would be.
I mean, he would be if he drafted first overall, but we don't think that's, and the likelihood of that happening isn't impossible, but it is unlikely. So we'll say we'll rule that as to like the highly unlikely side of the spectrum. The most likely is, if it's not McAvoy, it's Hampus Lindholm. So that's I was here.
Are you sure? Are you sure about that?
Well, it should be Lohrei. Like if he can just cut down some of the mistakes. Like I do think he's the most effective.
Really? More than Lindholm?
I think he should be. Now he's maybe not quite there yet. The power play really hasn't been any better with him running it. But yeah, I mean, I see more ability there in terms of what he can do running it than I see from either McAvoy or Lindholm. I mean, Hampus Lindholm, what I'll give him credit for is he keeps it very simple. Like he makes short passes and he gets pucks to the net. There's not really like a dynamic element where he's going to make anyone miss or, do anything too dynamic to like open up lanes, but he'll make the simple play and generally doesn't do anything stupid. So like that may very well be your best option, but ideally you have someone with who's a little more dynamic back there and can do a little bit more to create really good looks.
I mean, it should be in theory it should have been Charlie McAvoy. I mean, his inability to take that job for a couple of years now opened the gate for somebody like Mason Lohrei to get the opportunity. Obviously, he's been hurt. But if McAvoy keeps it simple and just focuses on just getting simple shots through and making the easy reads, it's not rocket science to quarterback a power play at any level. I mean, especially if you have the skill set that can do it. It really blows my mind that McAvoy just can't keep it simple. Zdeno Chara ran the power play for the Bruins from the top at times throughout his career. Like, you know what I mean? Like, obviously, he would defer to Mark Savard in the half wall at times and other players, but it's not, you're a facilitator up there. You're a facilitator. You don't have to do anything crazy. And McAvoy can certainly keep it simple. You have to be mobile. You have to get shots through. You have to have that ability to tee up one-timer shots for people. But I don't think that's anything that's outside of McAvoy's skill set. It shouldn't be, at least.
Yeah, but you touched on it a little. Like, you do have to be willing to shoot. You can't just be a facilitator. And McAvoy, too often, we've seen him not be willing to shoot.
And also not really moving a whole lot.
Yeah. Yeah, he moves more. Like, when he's on the second unit and they put him on the elbow, that gets him moving. But yeah, you're right. When he's up top, like, the whole power play gets too stationary. That's been a problem for a couple years now.
But getting shots through that's a mental fix. Like, that's not a physical inability. It's a mental inability.
But also, if you don't have a shooting lane, is a problem. So, like, if you're smart enough to know, oh, I can't get a shot through. Like, through is the key word here. Like, so, like, you have to.
I mean, how many, like, McAvoy would have shooting lanes and not take them. Like,
true.
I think the lack of mobility when he was running the power play at that time in the season, you had Pasternak on his weak side half wall, and his offside half wall. You had Marchand on his offside half wall, and neither one of them were moving nearly enough. Scott said it. That entire unit was stationary, and I think that they've done a better job as the season's gone on trying to get better movement. I just think that it wasn't simply McAvoy that was ailing that power play. Marchand was not really much of a shooting threat where he wasn't moving that well. Again, when your hips are open for the one-timer, it limits motion for you. So I just think the whole power play sucked. It sucked all year, but certainly from a mobility perspective, it was really bad back then. We were talking about it nonstop on this podcast, but I don't even know how we got to the power play talk, but hey,
I think it was you.
I don't think so. Maybe it was. We have to roll the tape back.
I think it was you talking about Brunet being a.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
And here we are.
Here we are. Thanks, Freddie. I did want to ask you guys about and Scott. I don't know if your wheels are turning for some power play thoughts still. You look like you were looking something up.
No, I was looking up like what their numbers are recently, but it's
okay.
They're not very good, so we can just keep going.
Okay, I want to ask you guys about Elias Lindholm, because heading into game 82, he now has 46 points on the season. Do any one of us think that 46 points from Elias Lindholm is good enough compared to that contract that he signed? Of course, the answer is not. The answer is no. But I still think that if you can say he finished the season sniffing 50 points, I'd be like, how the hell did that happen? He seemed invisible all year, and he was. But I do think that he's actually picked it up a little bit with the production of late. And I wonder, guys, if after having a full year under his belt, moving cross-continent, picking up his family, the whole team got off to a shit start this year, dating back to the summer. There was injuries, there were contract holdouts. It just hasn't been meshing. I wonder if a full off season, a summer to debrief, decompress, come back with a fresh mindset, maybe more time with Pasternak. Can Elias Lindholm be a 60-point guy for them for a couple of years? And does that make his contract more easier to accept? Like, I wonder if it can get any worse in this year. And I'm surprised that he's sniffing 50 points. I think the ability is there for him to have a better year next year for this team. And I think the Bruins really hope that's the case.
He wouldn't be close if he didn't have the last 6-game stretch where he had 8 points in the last 6 games. So his fastest piece of, point production the season, over a point per game in the last 6 games. And that's when he's with Pasternak. So it's not really a big surprise that this is when he's been producing at his best, though. When they were together early in the season with Zacha, it didn't necessarily click as well as it has with Geeky and over the last 6 games. And almost feels like he's, looks a little bit like a different player in terms of like where he's getting the puck and how guys are finding him when he's open. And so yeah, now he's at 46 points and 1 game left, so probably not going to make it to 50. But your question, Brian, is next year could he be a 60-point guy? Is that?
Yeah, and I'm not even necessarily looking like for a hard answer on the 60-point plateau, but just generally speaking, because you mentioned he was with Pasternak earlier this year and it wasn't clicking, but we see
Talking
him
about
clicking.
Geeky though.
I
Like,
know. And so is this something that they can build off of?
I mean, it can be if Elias, if they really have found some chemistry, something to cling to going through the summer, heading into next year. If Elias Lindholm starts the year on that line, like if your top line to start the year is Geeky, Lindholm, Pasternak, and it works, and it looks like it has these last handful of games, then Elias Lindholm will have 60 points. Like if that works, he'll get to 60 points. Now, that still leads to a question of like, is that good enough? Like, is that a number 1 center? In a perfect world, you're still looking for more than that. But like, at least it's something. At least it's better than what you got the vast majority of this season. So, yeah, like that's a good place to start. Like, I think if you were to start the year there and they play well, you're looking at a 60-point season. And then the question would be like, is there still even more? Because if you remember, like going into this season, we were talking about 70 to 80 points as a possibility for him. We can't possibly get greedy enough for that right now, but like a 60-point season next year maybe opens up that possibility somewhere down the road where it's not, a total lost cause. But yeah, I mean, that's 60 points is essentially what Pavel Zacha gives you playing with David Pasternak, and Pavel Zacha makes $3 million a year less. Now, I think Lindholm's better defensively, and he takes more big face-offs. So there's, a little bit of added value, but that's not really $3 million a year more of added value. Like you were hoping the offensive production was going to be more than what you get from Zacha there. And right now we're talking about, hey, if Elias Lindholm plays with Pasternak all year, he might be exactly what Pavel Zacha is. Like, okay, that still leaves me wanting more, but it's at least better than what you got most of this season.
Production-wise, what Pavel Zacha is, but as you mentioned, the other elements of the game, plus the same production level, is a net effect of being better. But at that delta of their contract comparisons, like you mentioned, is it worth it? Now, yeah, look, I just think that it's a prayer. It's a prayer that Lindholm ever gets to a 70-point season again. I would be very surprised because, Scott, to your point, he's got 46 points this year. Now, he can improve next year, but 25-point increase, I mean, So Bergeron and Krejci, in their time in Boston, they were never 100-point guys. And they were rarely 80-point guys. Or, like, I think Krejci's career high was like 76 points or maybe 79. I think Bergeron did crack low 80s a couple times, but my point is, like, yeah, like 60 points is not good enough in my opinion for a number 1 center, even a low production number 1 center. You got to crack high 60s into the 70s bare minimum in my opinion, but you don't have to be 100, right? But I think to Scott's point, like I'm skeptical that he could even get to like that low end of 1C production. I do think that a full year under his belt, though, an entire offseason in Boston to get acclimated with the city again and just a fresh mindset, I do think that he could be better next year. But there are people online or just Bruins fans in general who have said to me when I bring up the possibility of Boston re-signing Morgan Geekie, and there's a huge faction of fans that say he's a depth player, and people a lot of people are very quick to dismiss what Geekie has done because of the fact that he's done it with Pasternak. But I think that's a separate conversation. But what they say in general is Pasternak should be playing with better players, not depth players. And what I would say to that is, look, it would be perfect if you could go out there and get Mitch Marner and another, all-star caliber, an all-star caliber center to play with David Pat. The Bruins aren't going to go out in free agency and acquire all the best players. It's just not going to happen. And furthermore, the best teams in the league don't have 6 all-stars in their top 6. I mean, usually 4 of the 6 probably are all-star caliber, but there's always a sandpaper guy in your top 6 or somebody in your top 6 that isn't a bona fide top 6. Look at the other Bruins won the cup. Your top 6 was Lucic, Horton, and Krejci. Okay, but your second line was Bergeron, a rookie Brad Marchand that nobody knew at the time prior to that season, and a 41-year-old Mark Recchi. Like, is that an all-star caliber top 6 in that moment in time? No. Like, my point is, there's never going to be a perfect top 6.
Also a very different era. That was
I know.
2011 was much more defensive than 2025.
But
you're right. Though. Yeah, you need complements. You need complementary pieces who just fit with your stars, right? Like, not that like the Maple Leafs are some, great, North Star to follow, but like Matthew Nye is clicking with Austin Matthews. Like, you find a play like that. And that's what Morgan Geekie is doing. He just clicks with David Pasternak. They clearly have chemistry. Morgan Geekie is 4th in the NHL in goals since December 1st. Like, I don't know. I really don't understand why there are still fans looking for reasons to like move on from Geekie or trade him at a high point. Like, no, he fits with your best player, and he's probably going to make $5 to $6 million. That's a good contract and a good situation to have. Like, don't mess with that too much.
And he's a guy that you didn't have to trade for. You signed him as a free agent. So like, he's just, he was a good, good to identify as somebody that could be on your team. And he slowly worked his way up from like 3rd and 4th line to now he's on the first line with Pasta. And not only do I think that they shouldn't and won't move on from him in the off season, in a trade or whatever. I think that he's one of the guys that's doing what Don Sweeney wants to see other guys do, which is be ready to shoot at any second. And he was one of the guys that Don Sweeney, when he was on with Nesson this past week during one of the games, was talking about. It was praising for what he's been able to do, and not just for how he's been able to set up Pasternak, but also just his own mentality and in terms of shooting. And those 3 together with Lindholm now, Geekie, and Pasternak, if they play like they've been playing over the last 6 games, that's your first line.
Can I give a bit? Oh, sorry, Scott. Were you finishing a thought?
So I was just gonna say, since Bridget brought that up, I know I said on Sunday Skate, but just to get it here too, like Don Sweeney complaining about guys being too pass happy and not being shot ready is a little rich when like some of the guys you're talking about are Pavel Zacha and Casey Middlestad, who have been pass first guys their entire lives. Like, I don't know, maybe look in the mirror on that one and be like, geez, if I want shot ready guys, like maybe I should get shoot first guys. I don't know. Just a thought. Like, he's right that it is a frustration that this team overpasses, but you got to look at the players that he's brought in. Like, there aren't a lot of shooters on this team, so go get shooters then.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Scott. So I want to give a bigger example of a player that according to their stats and throughout their career, now they may have been in a top 6 role, but they weren't producing certainly at a high clip as in a top 6 role. But let's talk about Zach Hyman, for example. Okay. When he was in Toronto, here were his point totals: 6 points in 16 games his first year, 28 points in 82 games, 40 points in 82 games, 41 points in 71 games, 37 points in 51 games, 33 points in 43 games. Okay. He goes to Edmonton, 54 points in his first season, 76 games. His second season, 83 points. His third season, 77 points, 54 goals. Okay. Did Zach Hyman all of a sudden have this light bulb that went off that turned him into a, almost a point per game player and a 50+ goal scorer in Edmonton? Or was he the beneficiary of playing alongside one of the best players in the world? Maybe a little bit of both, but mainly the latter. And my point in saying that is, I will say, Hyman's had a down year this year. I think he's had 44 points in 73 games, so he's come back down to earth. And there's that flip side. But my point is, Edmonton went to a Stanley Cup final, Game 7, with him, like in a prominent role. So it can be about fit, and it can be about players that are playing above their solo ability, but it's a team sport. So I understand the want to have all-stars all over your top 6. I just don't think in a hard cap league with the competitive nature of, free agents wanting to go in different spots, and it's just not very feasible. So if Morgan Geekie ends up being one guy in your top 6 that isn't, now obviously their entire top 6 right now besides Pastrnak is not all-stars, but you get what I'm saying. If they can round out some other pieces and then Geekie's that guy, like Zach Hyman is in Edmonton, like where maybe he's playing better because he's with a star. I mean, teams can win like that. I mean, Sam Bennett's he's a top 6 guy in Florida. He doesn't have a ton of offense to his game, but relatively speaking, but he has enough offense and he brings so many other elements. So it's not just about point production. If you find guys with chemistry, it's not, oh, he's a depth guy. He's benefiting from Pastrnak. Yeah, he is benefiting from Pastrnak, but not every player, especially a depth player, as people call him, can take advantage of that opportunity. It's just not, in my opinion, not as consistently as he has. Those guys have plenty of chemistry, and I'm just not really ready to sit here and say, oh, it doesn't matter because he should be a third liner. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, maybe this season should have just made people think differently about Morgan Geekie and get out of the mindset of the past, like thinking of him as a depth guy and realizing that he's probably not that, right? Like maybe people are still stuck in the mindset of when he first came over or when he was playing on the third line, when he was being healthy scratched even earlier in the season. But now I don't look at him like that. I mean, I want to give him credit for what he's been able to do. And obviously he knows as well as everyone else that you're going to look better next to David Pastrnak. But like I said, to his credit, not everybody's been able to run with it the way that he has, and it just works. And we're going to be talking about him next year as a Bruin because I think that he signs a new contract. It shouldn't be through the roof. It should be more, it will be more than what he's getting now because he signed a really reasonable contract, 2 years, $2 million a year AAV contract when he first came over. So he'll be getting more than that, but he won't be breaking the bank either. And I don't know if it's the line that they have right now for the first line. I think that you're looking okay for that next season. And as long as Lindholm continues to do what he's been doing the last 6 games, if he can do that more consistently to start next season, I think that's you have a solution there for your first line, and you have the guy that you brought in to play as your first line center actually being like there to be your first line center rather than where he's been certain parts of the second half of the season on the third line. Like that, this solves your problem if the line can play the way it has since it's been united over the last 2 weeks or so. So I think that it's a good thing. Whether or not you think that Elias Lindholm's an elite top line center, as long as he can fill that role adequately, and Pasternak and Geekie can put up the points, and Lindholm can be there to help on the defensive side and win faceoffs and do some of the little things right on that line, I think it works. And then you're more worried about filling in your middle six, which isn't quite as daunting in the offseason. And, maybe your goal is to put together a really solid second line now. Though I think that line would be kind of a work in progress as of right now. It's everywhere from the second line down is kind of, up in the air, I think, at this point. But
yeah, I think whenever it is that you're ready to be a contender again, you're going to need a better number one center than Elias Lindholm. That's just the reality of it. Like, I can't get too excited over 5 good games, but you're so far away that, like, you're not going to be there next year. So if you're starting the year with Elias Lindholm there, like, don't worry about it. If it's good enough, if Pasternak still puts up his numbers and you have a top line that, keeps its head above water, like, okay, that's fine for the time being because you're not competing for a cup next year. So don't worry about who your number one, hopefully you're drafting your number one center of your next cup team. Hopefully you hit on that guy in the top 5 this year, but that's not a solution for next season. So, and with Geekie, like, I just come back to, like, you have so many holes to fill right now. Left wing across from Pasternak is not a hole. Like, Morgan Geekie has filled that perfectly fine. So don't mess with it. Like, just keep it there and then focus on other spots. And if somewhere down the line Geekie comes back to earth a bit and you need an upgrade, then you cross that bridge when you get there.
Yeah, and he's only 26 years old. Like, I don't know why everybody's so. I mean, okay, he's still young, relatively.
And he's like, and people don't know what he's like behind the scenes. Very likable guy, very, like, calm, well spoken. I don't know. He's always been really easy to deal with, to talk to, accountable. Like, he has a lot of good qualities maybe that people don't know about as well. Smart kid. It's very smart guy, it seems. And so,
and I think has found his voice a bit this season too, where, like, a couple times I've started to think in my head, like, not that he might wear a letter someday. Maybe he does somewhere down the road, but start to think, like, oh, he can be part of that secondary leadership group. Like, he can be that, we're talking about, like, who replaces, Charlie Coyle and Brandon Carlo, those leaders who don't have letters. There's been times this year where I've thought, like, Morgan Geekie might be developing into that kind of guy.
Yeah.
When the Bruins were entering the playoffs last year and they had a really good regular season, even though if you look back at the numbers from January to April, they actually were pretty pedestrian. But heading into last year's playoffs, did you think, like, did you know for sure that the Bruins weren't going to win the Stanley Cup with Zacha and Coyle as their top 2 centers? Because if you're so adamant that if they fill in the roster appropriately around Lindholm, but they have no chance. Like, I'm just trying to see, like, what the difference would be, because the Centennial season roster was filled in much better around 2 centers that weren't where they weren't good enough to win a cup. I thought that from the start. I saw that depth at center. I knew they weren't winning a cup. But if there was a part of you, Scott, that thought they could have entered those playoffs, why would your philosophy change with now?
Yeah, there really wasn't. Like, I don't think I considered last year's team a true cup contender. I think if I made any case for why they could go far, it would just be, Swayman and or Allmark stands on their head and you ride goaltending deep. And that happened for a round, almost 2, round and a half or so. Like, goaltending is obviously the great equalizer, so you can get pretty far if you just have the best goaltending, like the Bruins did last spring, and that still only got them to the second round. So, no, I never realistically thought that a team with Zacha and Coyle as its top 2 centers, and then Geekie bumping into that role a little bit. I never really thought that was a team that could win the cup, and I would say, if anything, last year's playoffs confirmed it even more, because they had no answers for Barkov in that Florida
Yeah.
series.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I agree with you. I was just trying to see if your opinion had changed at all, or if and it hasn't. Because I remember, like, first of all, you're not winning the cup with Elias Lindholm as your number one center, and in my opinion, which is why this impending draft, maybe they get lucky and they get that guy of the future. But I just remember like last year, it was so hard for me to enjoy that regular season. A, because I hated those colors, but we talked about that. But B, I knew where they were in the standings, but I knew that you have a certain ceiling when you don't have a certain caliber of players in your top six. And I just felt like I was kind of labeled very pessimistic just in general, because like I just knew that they weren't winning the cup, and people were like, well, you never know. It's like, well, no, you kind of do know. Like, you kind of do know if you don't have those certain players in your top six. It just doesn't happen. Like, you need to have, and they don't have it right now. Like, yeah, Bridget and I were talking about, and you, Scott, we're talking about potentially putting Lindholm the next year. Could he be better? I'm more so talking about it to help salvage what's a bad contract right now, not about them winning a cup, because
well, to salvage a bad contract, what would need to happen was you found a number one center, and like he can be an adequate like middle six guy, and like he's not like, yeah, like I guess actually maybe this is the reverse of what you're saying. For them to be able to fit him in properly, he probably slots in more as a middle six guy. For them to be able to salvage the contract, he would need to produce like a number one center. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, Bridget, because it could be the same answer for both. Because honestly, right, like what's he banking right now? 7 million.
775.
Okay, so 775 right now isn't 775 next year, the year after, when the cap's going up to 113 million. So maybe the answer is both. Maybe he is producing as a middle six guy in a couple of years, and his hit against the cap isn't as high as it is right now.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to tell people this when they signed him. Like, even now, 775 is not number one center money. Like, he was going to be the number one center on this team because they don't have any better options. But like, 775 is a number two center, and in a few years, it might be just a high price number three center, which might be what he is. But number one centers make 10 plus million, or like at least 9. So, like, yeah, I tried to make that point when they signed him, like, and I think everyone just latched on. And some of that, honestly, is the Bruins' fault with like the comparisons to Patrice Bergeron, which they should have just stayed away from. I don't know why Neely, Sweeney, Montgomery et al. Like, I don't know why they were in such a rush to compare Lindholm to Bergeron. Like, it was just set up unrealistic expectations, because now that's what you hear from people. People are, they told me he was going to be Bergeron. And it's like, well, anyone who's being realistic about it knew Elias Lindholm wasn't Bergeron. But, to the critics' favor, like, the Bruins themselves made that comparison. So I can't get mad at anyone who throws that out there.
I, in my experience, coaches cannot stay away from comparing their centers to Patrice Bergeron. Like, every college coach,
they should all be banned.
Every college coach I've ever talked to, if they have a center who can like play defense at all, they're like, oh, comp Patrice Bergeron. But on the men's side, the women's side, every like, he's one of the most common comps that you hear, because we're in New England, and it's high praise to be considered like Bergeron, but I feel like a lot of people have gotten labeled that when it should be a very small few, because like Patrice Bergeron is Patrice Bergeron, and no one else has him. So
I forget what player it was, but I saw John Buccigross recently on Twitter say that somebody could like keep an eye out for this player, like could be the next Patrice Bergeron. It's like, come on, Bucci, like, come on, like, Bergeron's the greatest defensive center of a generation, and one of the greatest defensive centers of all time.
Arguably of all time.
Like, and I don't think anyone's winning that many Selkies, and you
mean Bergeron's the future Bergeron award?
Yeah, the future Bergeron's not gonna pass his record for
I think the problem is that like people view that as like that's an easier comparison to make because it doesn't seem like Bergeron's game isn't as flashy. So, like you're not going to compare someone to Connor McDavid because they have to be like blazing fast with these incredible hands and unreal shot. And it's like that there's obvious standout skills there where you're like, well, you can watch a play for 2 shifts and realize he's not Connor McDavid. Whereas like Bergeron's game's more subtle. So I think people just think it's an easier comparison to make, but it's like you're doing the same kind of disservice where it's like, yeah, you're comparing him, like we said, to like arguably the greatest defensive center ever. Like that in and of itself is like an incredibly lofty level that 100% of young centers aren't getting to. So like,
this is another thing that another reason why, if they have any leadership ability, if they're like well liked in the room, calm, like personality traits, then they're getting compared to like it's a few things, and I've seen it happen. And I don't think I've ever talked to one coach that said, "Oh, this person's like a Sidney Crosby or a Connor McDavid or an Alex Ovechkin," or never heard a single person give a comp. Like occasionally you'll be like, "Oh, he's kind of like a Nick Suzuki," or like, but for like by and large,
I think coaches should start just with like absolutely absurd comparisons. just really lean in. Like any kid who can take a one time, just be like, yeah, he might be the next Ovechkin.
Well, yeah. Well, so I was talking, and this wasn't my question, but I was on a coach's call with Greg Carvel earlier this year, and someone asked him, because Cole O'Hara had a great season, someone asked him for a comp to Cole O'Hara, and Carvel goes, I don't watch the NHL. Like, we're going to go that far that we're not even going to pretend like we know anyone in the NHL. Like,
yeah, basically,
go.
if someone's a good two-way player, good two-way center, they just get compared to Bergeron. It's not really. I don't know why it gets tossed around, but it's unfair to a lot of prospects. But in any event, as it pertains to the Bruins, this episode was fun. It was a bit all over the place at times, but there's so many unknowns about this team. I have no idea what to expect when it comes to the offseason. I can't even look at their roster for probably 5 months from now or 4 months and tell you if I even think it'll be competing for a playoff spot or not. I mean, the first things first is let's see who they draft, and is that player potentially NHL ready next year? Could they have an impact? I don't think that player will be in the NHL. Okay, so the next opportunity is let's see what they do in free agency. Are there any trades over the summer? But it's really difficult to assess this team going forward because there's a lot of work to be done and there's a lot of unknowns. And so we'll do our best to talk you guys throughout the summer, but we'll just take it one day at a time and one event at a time.
Just a reminder too, we're not going away in the summer. We still record normally twice a week. So it's a little bit less, but we work it in around our 4th of July celebrations and everything.
And I mean, I will say, like, obviously it's gonna be weird not having any playoffs to cover, but I am actually excited to have like draft talk that matters because I do love the draft, but most of the years we've been doing the show, the Bruins either don't have a first round pick or it's a late first, which
Fabian Lysell
in the 20s, you're kind of already talking about like prospects that people don't really know and are going to be multiple years away, and it's hard to get excited for. So I am excited to talk about top 10 prospects.
Yeah, I mean, the last time we had a serious conversation, I mean, I guess we had it a little bit last year with Dean Letourneau, but once again, that was still a late first round draft pick. Fabian Lysell was a late first round. Like those are the only 2 guys we've talked about. So certainly this is different. And there's going to be more eyes on free agency too. I mean, the off season is maybe where some people are trying to regain hope for next year and see if something gets them excited. Maybe who they draft gets people excited. Maybe who they add as a free agent or trade for gets people excited. There is certainly more to talk about in the offseason, and we will continue to put out multiple episodes a week. Like I said, I don't know if we're bringing back What If Wednesday, which was something we did last summer, which was basically people could just send in their like hypothetical question, what if this person never got traded, or what if they traded for this person, or what if they drafted this person, not that person. We could do that again if people liked it. Just some content. We do a lot of mailbags in the summer as well. So
yeah, I
certainly-
think we're probably going to do a mailbag maybe next week. I mean, this week we have obviously final regular season game Tuesday, and then we're expecting breakup day later in the week, possibly Thursday, maybe. So like we'll have reaction to that. I do feel like it's worth acknowledging. So if people miss this, Monday morning on the Greg Hill show, Greg Hill said he has heard that there's going to be a resignation in the front office on Wednesday. He did not say who. I don't know if he heard a specific name or what. He really didn't go any deeper than that. As we sit here recording, I have not heard anything other than just what Greg Hill said on his show. So I'm not going to speculate, but obviously something to keep an eye on to see, once the season ends, like that there's going to be changes. It's just a matter of how big they are. And whether it does involve someone, high up at the top of, second level front office, I don't know. But that's, it was certainly interesting to hear that, and will be something to monitor.
Also interesting to, put the date on it. I guess the day after the regular season ends, I guess, makes sense as why Wednesday was given as a date. But yeah, we'll see. That's something that we can't confirm. We just want to bring it up because Greg does have some connections over there, and he reported it this morning on the Greg Hill show, and who knows, maybe it becomes a more wider topic of conversation throughout the next few days because people latch onto it or whatnot. So, but yeah, you bring up another good point of other things that we'll have to watch for. We'll have to watch the coaching search. Who are they interviewing? There's going to be all sorts of rumors and things about that and who they're looking at. And then potentially, if this is true, you're going to have to replace one of your front office guys. And that's, not easy to do. So
Speaking of front office people, I want to leave you guys with this prompt and listeners with this prompt as well, because I have a question, and we can get into it not necessarily today, but I just want to bring this up for a later date in case I forget. Is Peter Chiarelli's tenure in Boston underrated? Is what he meant to the Bruins underrated? Obviously, Peter Chiarelli was the general manager of the Stanley Cup team, but I just feel like when you look at that roster, it's not like he inherited 95% of it. The majority of that roster was brought in via Chiarelli. Even the Zdeno Chara signing, like technically, I think there was who was the interim GM for a few months?
Jeff Gordon.
Yes. That still had Chiarelli's fingerprints all over it. But the 2011 roster, if you look at it, all those guys that were brought in via free agency or trade, outside of like maybe a handful of guys or less than where Chiarelli brought them in, he obviously eventually, put them in cap jail when he got fired. They missed the playoffs 2 years in a row under his leadership, but they go to the finals in 13. They win in 11. They win the President's Trophy in 14. They lose in the second round. Then they miss the playoffs. They're in cap jail. He definitely made mistakes signing guys to long-term deals after the Cup win, but he also was responsible for drafting David Pastrnak. And that is the one where right now it's like Pasternak's a Chiarelli guy. And I don't know if that's talked about that much. And he was drafted 25th overall because, Scott, you're talking about late first-round draft picks. Pastrnak is the best Bruins draft pick in how long, right? Obviously, McAvoy would be second. But I just wonder, like, I feel like
when it's all said and done, Pastrnak may very well go down as their best pick ever, or certainly up there.
And I just feel like when Chiarelli's name gets brought up, it's brought up not very fondly. And I understand the last couple of years in the cap jail and stuff, but when you consider that most of the Stanley Cup winning roster he was responsible for orchestrating, and he's also the man behind the pick of the Bruins' best player modern day and going forward, at least right now. Do you feel like he's underrated? His time in Boston is underrated?
I feel like it's probably properly rated at this point. Like I think the balance of it has probably landed in about the right place, which is like, yeah, obviously he deserves credit for building the 2011 Cup team. And also his mismanagement over the next several years after that was legitimately egregious. Like he got them into a really bad spot cap-wise that you just can't really get to. So, like that they both happened. And I don't think one, obviously the Cup is the thing. So like put that at the top. So yeah, I lean towards my opinion of Chiarelli's would be mostly positive. But I'm not like, I don't know. I never lost sleep over them moving on from him. I felt like it was the right time, and I
Yeah.
still don't really have any regrets over that.
No, and me neither. And I understood at the time. He missed the playoffs twice in a row, albeit by like a combined 3 points. But the roster
Well,
was
it was only
mismanaged.
once when they fired him, because then the next year was Sweeney's first year that they missed again.
Oh, you should really?
Yeah,
We can,
14-15 they miss.
yeah.
Fire Chiarelli. 15-16 Sweeney's first year. They
Okay.
miss again, and then they get back
Okay.
in 17.
Yeah. So no, yeah, you're right. And at the time, like I understood it too. But it's the Pasternak piece in retrospect that's like, oh shit, like he also was the guy behind him and his scouting staff at the time, but they were behind that pick. And like I have to look at the picks around Pasternak, but like if you don't take him, like my point is, it was building the Cup roster, then the unforgivable cap jail you reference, but it's the Pasternak piece. I feel like doesn't get talked about enough that he was a Pasternak guy.
I feel too though, Brian. That also falls
Or
on
he was a Shirley guy. I'm sorry. Yeah.
yeah, that also the Pasternak thing also falls on all of those other GMs before 25 to
It
pass on
does.
him.
It does. But that's the nature of the draft. Like people sometimes people talk about like Lynn Hudson, for example, getting drafted. Like, how could people pass on Lynn Hudson? Well, Montreal passed on Lynn Hudson because they didn't pick him in the first round; they picked him in the second round. And look at Tampa Bay. Like Tampa Bay gets all this credit for drafting Kucherov and Point and others outside the first round, but Tampa Bay also passed on them because they picked him in later rounds. So like you're right, Bridget, but that happens every draft. There's always that situation. I don't know. I just feel like most people, if you ask most people like who drafted Pasternak, I feel like a lot of people might say, I don't know, was that Sweeney's first year or second year? Or people might, well,
I think
actually, no,
most
that's not
people,
true. People know it wasn't
to be
Sweeney.
honest, I think most people know it wasn't him because they like to
Yeah.
pick apart the Sweeney drafts. So
But he did make that Pasternak pick before he left. And I just feel like that has paid such dividends for Boston. Obviously, it hasn't resulted in a Stanley Cup, but I mean, he's going to be when it's all said and done, one of the top scorers in franchise history. And I just
and
feel
he's
like
also one of the more engaging players that brings fans through the door that other players who are free agents want to sign so that they can play with Pasternak. Like there's other intangibles about him besides just him scoring that has made him valuable. Fan favorite, obviously, big personality, guy that other guys want to play with and be around. So, it's all worked out. That pick is still, you know what? I was talking to my dad about this yesterday. I was like, I still can't believe Pasternak went 25th. Like, do you think Dean Letourneau at 25 will be the next Pasternak?
you know what's
Same pick.
one other major event that I forgot that's anti-Chiarelli. Oh boy, what a awful trade that was. The Tyler Seguin trade. That was terrible.
Timeout. Let's like hit a timeout on this. That was the very first ever episode of Behind the Bee because I started rewatching it. It's crazy how long ago that was. His hand was forced on that. Like there was, there was.
I mean, he's the GM. It's his call.
I don't know.
I know, but there was
the return sucks.
Getting calls from other agents saying if this guy's here, we're not here. Blah blah blah. Like he had to make a decision, and he ended up,
And the return still sucked, which still falls on him.
return sucks. Yes.
Although Riley Smith turned out to be a pretty damn good player, both in Boston and elsewhere. Stanley Cup champion, but yeah. Anyway, okay. If we're dishing out good and bad, the good is the roster construction in 2011. and the Pasternak pick. The bad is the cap jail that he put them in the Tyler Seguin trade. So
Brian,
it all probably comes out in the wash that he's appropriately remembered, just like Scott said.
Brian started his own mailbag like once we were already an hour through here. He's like, "Hey, this one comes from Brian in
The left side of the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right.
Most questions like that in the off season. Enjoy the last game Tuesday. I don't know. Maybe you guys have tickets. It's a home game. By the way, your cousin, Mark McLaughlin, probably playing. I saw the Devils.
Yeah, called up by New Jersey.
So he's going to be playing for the Devils, potentially last game of the season up there. So anyhow, yeah, guys, our last time at the Garden this year on Tuesday. So it's well, unless for whatever reason we're back for Celtics, but yeah, kind of it's always a weird moment, and then breakup day is always awkward and uncomfortable, but yeah, it's what's coming for us this week.
Alrighty, well, we will keep ears open for the story that Scott mentioned could happen midweek, and obviously we'll be around on Wednesday to record for you guys. So until then, thank you for listening, and we will talk to you soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching this Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.